Everybody, it's Leroy from Leeroy Gaming, and today I'm coming to you with my review of Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance. Now, this review has been coming along a little longer than I had originally hoped, but I did want to make sure that I gave this game ample opportunity to try it out, both solo and also in multiplayer. Now, if you're familiar with my other videos, you'll know that I'm pretty in depth with my videos. Because this is a review, I wanted to try something a little different, especially since it's my kind of first big formal review of a video game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a more quick and succinct TLDW, or too long didn't watch, synopsis of my review. For those of you that like my in-depth content and would like to see a breakdown of why I think of what I do uh, of this game, and to see more footage, etc., then you can watch the more extended part of this video. As always, for your convenience, I am going to be adding timestamps in the description below so you can jump around to the chapters that most interest you. So, what are my overall feelings about this game? If I were to give it kind of a tagline, is for better or for worse, I call it Dungeons and Dragons Outriders LITE. Now, if you did see the release that happened earlier this year of the looter shooter Outriders, which I personally think actually is a phenomenal game. It had a very rough start. Everything from the loot system being unbalanced, tremendous issues with balance and bugs and issues, and the press really came down hard on the game. Now, with this game, a similar thing has happened, although some elements are a little bit more warranted. And I don't know if some of these elements are quite as easy to fix as the fixes that we found in Outriders. Because if you haven't checked out Outriders recently, I recommend it. It's actually become much more fun with some balances and tweaks that have been occurring. With that being said, when we talk about Dungeons and Dragons: The Dark Alliance, I have to state that this game is a completely different game, or almost a completely different game, depending on whether you play this solo or co-op. Now, early in development, the developers kind of did state that this is really meant to be a co-op game and that you can play it solo, but it's much harder. And unfortunately, to its own detriment, that is completely true. If you are going to play this game solo, your experience, in my opinion, will be much worse than if you play co-op. And in my final section of this review, where I actually give it a score, I point that out and numerically give it a numerical value. But suffice to say, if you are going to be playing this game solo, I highly recommend you only check it out on Xbox Game Pass or PC Game Pass, where it's basically going to be free for you. I don't believe the game is such a state where it's worth kind of purchasing it for full price, even though this is a kind of like a double A budget $40 base price that may or may not be on sale as you watch this video. Now, in multiplayer, some of the problems that I find in the single player that I'll go over in the full review are fixed, or at least band-aid, or there are elements that are going to help you overcome some of the issues. Now, overall, my problems remain in both versions as such. The game is buggy. It was actually, when it first released, extremely buggy, including an issue where every time you played in a multiplayer game, after a mission, it would disconnect everybody every single time. There are control issues, and when it comes to especially the PC setup, the game plays much more naturally. I'm a gamepad, whether you play on PC or Xbox, obviously. Another issue I have is the communication by the developers. So there was a little post on the 22nd of June, and then there was another post on July 2nd. I would personally expect a little bit more communication from a game that has a troubled launch to kind of reassure the players and really emphasize the changes they want to make. That is an issue that I have, that, for example, Outriders was very good at fixing, where they had great communication. This game, as a looter shooter kind of brawler with DLC plans already in place, you'd think that they would kind of communicate more clearly some of the things that are going to do to fix this game. Now, as far as the game goes, it looks actually really good, especially for the price you're paying. The sound is good. The voice work actually, I think, is excellent. The music is quite enjoyable. So all those elements are pretty darn good. As I mentioned earlier, control is a bit of an issue. The lock-on targeting supposedly got updated in a recent patch on July 2nd, but I still don't recommend utilizing it. It zooms in way too much. I've never used it, and it just feels off. You have to get used to kind of the controls. They're not as smooth and natural as I would like them. Once you get used to it, it actually feels pretty good as far as the controls. You kind of figure out how to aim and control it, but it's not nearly as natural. And this is the area that I'm worried the most. I don't know if they can fix it. You can fix the balancing for loots, you can fix the glitches, but if you do not like the way this game controls after trying it out for half an hour to an hour, it's not going to really change. And that I feel like could be the biggest game breaker for some individuals. All right, another big topic is the quality of the AI, the artificial intelligence in this game. Now, for me personally, while I was playing as Drist, as my main character, I didn't notice as many AI issues only because Drist is very rapid moving, as you're seeing during the footage here in the background. I kind of get in the face of the enemies, I'm constant instigating, and so it covers up to a certain degree or to a large degree some of the bad AI tendencies, and this has been mentioned in other reviews quite significantly. You can notice the most if you play the archer character, Cathy Bree, because at range sometimes the enemies will not initiate, sometimes they'll just stand around. In multiplayer, obviously when you're playing with 3 or 4 players, it's more likely you're kind of getting in range of the enemies or getting in their faces, and it kind of plays as the game intends. But if you're playing, for example, by a single player, it's very possible to kind of from range to initiate one enemy, the other ones are standing around not doing much, and it kind of feels off. The game does use some cheap tactics, as you'll even see in this. We are playing on a higher difficulty, but we're also really, really well geared, and the AI will kind of rely on one-shotting or two-shotting you in order to kind of knock you out potentially, as opposed to, using really good tactics and coordination. So in a kind of beat 'em up kind of smasher, looter smasher sense, partially forgivable, but at the same time, because this isn't like a deeply tactical game, at the same time I would have liked the AI to be better. If you are, again, playing an aggressive melee style, you may not notice this nearly as much. But if, again, you are playing ranged, or if you kind of want to or are going to purposefully trying to take advantage of the AI, you are going to notice that, yes, you can kind of either bug out or keep certain enemies from engaging. It is very possible to stun lock certain enemies or continuously knock them down. There is no, from what I can tell, any crowd control kind of lockout. So it's not like in some other games where if you crowd control, stun, or knock down an enemy once or twice, then they become immune for a while. No, you can use the same tactic over and over. If you can pull off the tactic, you can abuse certain mechanics, potentially even, let's say, knocking down an enemy in a corner repeatedly, even a boss sometimes, and killing them before they can retaliate. So unfortunately, again, that's an area that really could use work. A game flow loop is very, very natural to get into. It's basically you start at a camp and you go on any one of 21 progressive missions that you unlock. The story is very bare bone. It's all told kind of through the cutscenes, some banter back and forth with the characters in your party. So if you're expecting like a Dungeons and Dragons epic campaign, you're not going to really find it. The main thing here is, do you like a bash 'em up looter smasher where you get loot, where you constantly upgrade your loot? If you like that loot cycle and you like the characters, you may actually enjoy this game. Now, currently there are 4 characters that you can choose from. They're traditional kind of, as far as play styles. You get kind of like a fighter, a defensive fighter, you got a barbarian, you got a ranger that doesn't use bows. It's like a melee ranger, plays more like a rogue, to be honest with you. And there's an archer that also does a lot of kicking, interestingly enough. They have sets of moves that they unlock. There's roughly 15 moves everybody gets. And then you're going to have basically a total of roughly 4 abilities. You're only going to get to take 2 of them with you on each mission. You can swap them out as you see fit in between missions, and everybody has an ultimate. And between those combinations is your gameplay. Big problem I have, as I'll go over in a more extensive review section, is that these moves are completely unbalanced. There are some moves that do a ton of damage, not surprisingly. Other ones you would expect as a super move to do a lot, they don't do that much at all. Some are pretty easy to pull off, some more difficult to pull off. The tooltips are almost non-existent for some of these effects, so the communication of what abilities really do to the player is a big problem. I found that when I played Drist, which is kind of the ranger rogue kind of archetype, um, I found one really good move that did a lot of damage. It was a kind of quote unquote, as the game says, it's the most difficult move. I learned how to use it, and I pretty much spammed that plus some basic, light and heavy attacks, and that worked for me. But I was disappointed that some of the advanced moves and special moves really weren't worth using. Now, a big part of any kind of looter shooter or looter basher, or whatever you want to call it, looter brawler, is the loot. There are 8 slots of gear that you can equip. There are some cosmetic changes to the way your character looks depending on what you equip. But for example, Drist uses 2 scimitars. He will never use anything but scimitars. You can't equip daggers, you can't equip longswords, anything like that. So there's limitations. There are sets that you can collect for every slot of in the game where you can get 3-piece, 5-piece, and 8-piece bonuses. You can mix and match, obviously, like a 3-piece and a 5-piece, or do one full 8-piece. Some of the bonuses are interesting. A lot of them are underwhelming. Sadly, even some of the 8-piece bonuses are a little underwhelming. So there's a tremendous balance issue there. The biggest problem I have with loot, though, is it's very, very hard to get rare loot, and I'll go into that further. But needless to say, the game is extremely stingy with loot. This is something they can easily fix, but right now, it's what makes the game the least enjoyable for me is when you beat a piece of content that you try and challenge yourself on a high difficulty level, and then sometimes you would expect to get one or more legendaries, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait, I beat the hardest content in the game, and I got some common and uncommon loot. That feels really, really bad. That really needs to get fixed. And then finally, there's endgame progression. And in a nutshell, there's 6 difficulty levels that you progress through. You get better rewards, EXP, supposedly loot, etc. for making the game harder. That's supposed to be the end game grind. Again, currently the problem I have is the higher difficulties don't necessarily net enough of an increase in loot quality. A lot of times that makes it feel really rewarding. They're supposed to be addressing some of that and also increasing, adding extra difficulty levels in the future, as well as new content and even new character, an expansion that's coming down later in the year. So, overall, my quick synopsis is as such. If you're playing solo, I would say you can try it out on Xbox or PC Game Pass, see if it feels okay for you. But I would really temper my expectations. I believe a lot of the reviews for the game from major outlets are really, really appropriate if you're playing solo. For co-op, it's a lot more fun. Yes, when I talk in the full review about the AI, etc., it's limited. There's a lot of AI issues, but I found it really, really fun when you coordinate with other players. When I played with 4 players, I found it the most fun, and there is more potential, especially once a couple patches go out. So this isn't going to win any Game of the Year awards, but in a multiplayer, I don't think it's the worst game of the year, as some people would say. It can be enjoyable if you enjoy kind of looters, shooters, looter slashers. There's potential there, especially after some extra patches. Some of these changes are coming in, including the ability to play any character you want. You can even have 4 Drists, for example. That's coming in an upcoming patch. It's going to fix a lot of these issues. So, again, if you're on the fence, which you probably should be at best, try out on PC or Xbox Game Pass if you can. Otherwise, I mean, you can buy it on Steam, try it out for 2 hours, get a feel for it, and obviously before the 2-hour limit, if you don't like it, then return it. So again, do I think it's as bad as the main reviewers say? No. Am I going to pretend and say this is a great game? No. But it has some potential, and it could become a decent game over time. So that right there, boys and girls, is my kind of as close to a short review, succinct review that I can do. Now, moving forward, we're going to go ahead and go into the major sections. I'm going to kind of show footage of the game. I'm going to kind of specifically show you in-game elements of the game and the interface, what I like and what I don't like. So make sure to check that out. Now, if you found this review helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Also, if you actually want to play this in multiplayer but maybe don't have friends to play with, make sure to check me out on my stream on twitch.tv/Leeroy Gaming stream. I do currently stream this game multiple times a week, help people power level, help people get gear with some of the other people in my community. And speaking of community, make sure to check out the Leeroy Gaming Discord. There's a link below, and you can find other people that are currently playing this game and enjoying the game. So if you, again, don't have personal friends that play this, you can find some people in our community. That's a step above just randomly joining a queue in-game, so you can get a little better experience. All right, now at this point, we're going to go a little more in depth on each section. We're going to start with graphic and sound and the music portion. We're going to kind of put together. This is kind of the visual flair, the kind of audio experience. These are all elements that are not going to change by any patches, etc., except for some of the performance that I'll mention in a second. So as you can kind of see right here, even if I'm talking about, the game is actually quite pretty. This is your beginning camp. It's got decent sound effects, very good sound effects. When I show you a clip from one of the levels, I'll have some of the music playing in the background. You can kind of get a feel for the look of the game. Now, some people say that there's a lot of repetition in the levels, and I would actually disagree with that. I feel like the levels are actually quite big and sprawling. It's actually kind of potential to get a little lost. There's a lot of side paths, but there is a general theme for each one of the 7 quote-unquote missions. So each mission has 3 levels, and each one of these missions does have a very specific feel for it. There are different layouts. There is a main path they can follow by kind of following your little radar breadcrumb. But there are side paths that you can take with different dangers, so you can get extra chests, little mini bosses, etc. So visually, it's quite nice. Now, when the game first released, there were a lot of graphical inconsistencies. Even if you played on a high-end system, what I found is that there would be a lot of random FPS issues. Now, most of these can have been kind of ninja patched in the last couple weeks since the game released, so it has gotten better. But again, I don't feel like this game is fully optimized for the kind of quality of graphics. If you have a high-end system, you would feel like there would be 0 hiccups on the FPS, but they still sometimes occur. I can't speak as much for the consoles, but I've also heard kind of up and down reviews from people playing the consoles. It's by no means horrid, but it does need to be optimized visually. Okay, at this point I'm going to give you a quick look at small snippets of the visuals as well as potential audio and music from the first 5 levels, so you can get a feel of the differences of the looks, because again, levels are different. So I'm going to be kind of quiet as I run through here and show you some of the looks. I'm going to be skipping the fights as I can just to give you a feel.
Kind of put a stop to it.
Yeah, but we still gotta get inside, don't we?
Yeah, but the dwarves sabotaged the place. Broken bridges, exploding glyphs.
Get up, boy!
So there's a sample of some of the visuals and audio of the first kind of quest area, first quest.
Hey! I need that! I'm on break! Cowboy! More play!
Alright, and here's going to be some footage from the second quest line. It'll be a comparison.
This Emperor Handbook is indeed bold if he believes he can hold this valley.
The audio music. An extra emphasis on the conversations the enemies have as you approach them, which can be pretty funny and fun. There's examples of side areas.
This one's had training.
I'm watching you, Crow.
A very distinct feel for this level. And now here's an example of the third level. If you love this.
One never does forget the smell of the league. It clings to the stonework.
A very different, distinct look. Previous to.
I thought all the Burbees died in the war. Got some rats.
And all these are the beginning portions. And remember, there are 3 levels per quest. This is generally the first section of each of the missions.
Run to your holes, goblins!
So again, very distinct aesthetic.
Somebody get that Crow sucker.
Alright, now here's the aesthetic and look of the 4th quest line. Very, very different.
The Order took a
Very
great
cold,
risk
very-
exposing themselves to
reminds me of,
recover
like,
Kessel's corpse.
as considered
All the more
World of
reason to
Warcraft.
ensure whatever they're up to is stopped before it can take its full form.
Different enemy types. Much colder, much more Icewind Dale-like. Generally, anything red like that in that area, so look at that is like
Castle lead us to the sword, if he can.
all that banter amongst the enemies is always fun to listen in on. Missions there. Again, multiple paths, you can go over there, or you can go down here.
Have you been approached by a Malgus?
On more than one occasion.
Manipulate.
Their intentions are transparent. Enemies of the sword.
So again, very, very different levels of the other short quest line. And here's the 5th design, 5th quest line.
Durgar in the Dale.
And again,
Not a
quite
winning
bit
combination for dwarves, Regid, or the people of Ten
different. Music
Towns.
tone different, layout obviously different, graphical themes different. Now here you got a bunch of dwarves you're fighting with. They reacted to me. So, of all the criticisms I found from other reviewers, the one I strongly disagree is the comments that there isn't variety in the levels, graphics. They are distinct, great. The game sounds great. The music is very, very pleasant. Voiceovers are great. And again, there are a bunch of side paths you can take, which is called the main paths. Even though there's no mini-map, if you just follow these markers, it'll take you down the main path. And then you can be rewarded by going down the side paths if you wish. Because they're not timed, it's not an issue either. So again, very, very different in this level. So, hope that look at the various graphics, level layouts helps you out. Get a better feel for this. These were previous, the first 5 quest lines. There's 2 full other quest lines with distinct looks. I don't want to spoil those. They're around the last bosses. but should give you a good initial feel.
Oh, I'm gonna have to let one out, you.
All right, next I want to talk about the gameplay loop. And I'm going to show you live here some footage of me in the base camp. Now, you basically start here, and you're going to be kind of living here. When the developer was talking about creating this game, they knew there was a limited budget. This isn't like Dungeons and Dragons, like the Dark Alliance games from the early 2000s, where it's gonna kind of like a full story going from city to city, and like as isometric kind of game like Diablo or something like that. This game plays much, much more differently. You basically have a hub, and this is the hub, and I'm going to right now show you everything that's ever going to be there. When you log in, you run down this little corridor. Over here is your trophy room. To your right is going to be your vendor, where you actually don't really buy anything. You can upgrade gear and upgrade your potions. Over here is your loot chest, and basically after each mission, this is where you get your loot. It drops in game, and you see the quality of the loot, but you don't know what you really get until you come here after the mission. To the right here is where you go when you're ready to start a mission. Up this path, none of this does anything on the right here. This is where you pick your missions. And over here, there's a little training area where you can basically try out different abilities. And I'll show you how much damage you do on a combo. So it's kind of like a test dummy, which is kind of, it's cool if you want to test out how good abilities are, or when you want to see how not good they are. So that's helpful and nice. And the whole loop is you go over to this interface. When you start, you have this tutorial, and that's all you're going to have. And then you're going to have a progression of 7 missions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And each one of them is going to have 3 sub-levels. One thing that's kind of nice is when you mouse over a mission, it'll tell you what the preferred gear set drop is here. They do tend to drop more, but you can basically find any type of gear anywhere. Unfortunately, there's no tooltip to tell you, for example, what the Tundra Raptor set is. It will be slightly different what it does depending on your class. So you have to go into your inventory and check what that is, which again is going to be one of the issues you see throughout this game. The tooltips are, I find them really quite wanting. Not nearly up to snuff for a game that has so much details as this game does. So basically, you pick one of these missions, you select the difficulty, there's 6 difficulty levels. On the right-hand side, it'll tell you what kind of item levels you're going to get from it, how many pieces of bonus guaranteed loot, how much gold, what kind of materials you're going to get minimum, and the EXP for the run. It tells you on the left-hand side the combat power, your personal or your party combat power. So you kind of compare that level to what your difficulty is, and that should give you an idea, okay, am I ready for this or not? It kind of works, it kind of doesn't, but it does give you a general idea. So in this case, with my level of 3552, I'm supposed to be able to easily do level 6 here, and we'll get into why that is correct and is also not correct. So you were to select it, and then all you do is you go over here onto that portal, and it loads you into a level. You finish the level. As soon as you're done, it takes you right back here, and then you loot. Now again, one of the problems of multiplayer was, if you played multiplayer upon release for the first couple days, what was happening is that you would come back and it would disconnect you after each mission. You wouldn't lose loot, but it was annoying because you had to reconnect with everybody. And this wasn't a huge issue as far as the formality of, okay, just get the group back together because you didn't lose anything, but it was frustrating. It has since been fixed, but it also led to the other issue. If you're playing this on PC Game Pass, the interface for the PC Game Pass is horrendous. It crashes all the time. It's confusing how to even make friends. I don't really play on multiplayer that much on PC Game Pass. This was the first time I did, and I'll be honest, I had trouble figuring out how to connect to friends. Sometimes I would try and invite somebody to the party. It would crash the app. Again, that's no negative hit on this game. It's not the game's fault, but it makes it much, much more difficult to play with. Supposedly on Xbox Game Pass, this is done much better, and there are no issues. Now, I will say, because this is part of the gameplay experience, currently, if you want to play with friends, this game is cross-compatible with Xbox and PC Game Pass. If you're on Steam, you cannot play with anybody else. They're supposed to change this in a patch where you can play with Steam, potentially Stadia maybe, and the Game Passes, but currently you cannot. And if you're on PlayStation, good luck. You're going to not be able to play with anybody except for PlayStation 4 with PlayStation 5. They're working on that. I know there's some issues with it. And as of the timing of this review, I don't even know if that works there. Again, if you're going to take a risk on this game, I recommend make sure you have Xbox or PC Game Pass. If not, you may have a lot of issues. But that is a bit of a frustration that even though it's supposed to have some cross compatibility, it's not as clear for a brand new person. So there's my little warning on that, because it will get in the way of your gameplay loop and gameplay experience. Now, next we're going to talk about controls, and I gotta say this: the mapping of the controls for the Xbox is fine, or for the gamepad is fine. For PC on the keyboard, it is atrocious by default. I don't know what they were thinking. You have, if you look at the screen here, bottom left-hand side, you have your 4 potions. That's 1 through 4. The buttons, that's not too bad. But they had some weird elements, like dodging is supposed to be C when you're dodging all the time. They had just some very, very weird layouts. So what I recommend if you're playing this on the PC, the first thing you want to do is go under your options, go under key bindings, and you'll see here for me, I have light attack is left click, fierce attack is right click, aim by default here, it goes to control. Now, what's annoying right now is I just loaded it into this game to do this review, and it seems to have reset my controls that I just noticed right now. The aim control is not horrible. If you hold down control, it's going to basically make it so no matter your character, you do kind of like a basic weak range attack. You mainly only want to use this feature if you need to, like, sometimes there'll be items that can be broken in the world that you can't reach. So for tagging them or for puzzles. Other than that, it's really, really bad. Toggle lock on. Do not lock on. It locks onto a enemy character, which supposedly makes it easier for you to hit them, but it zooms so close that it feels horrible. I think they said they're going to work on this in a patch, but as of right now, this makes the game way worse than better. And then when you're locking on in here, imagine, look what it's telling you. It's saying, okay, on your keyboard, move your hand way over to the left and right arrows to change the targets. That's completely inconvenient. I'm not going to be picking up and moving my hand to adjust that. So if you were to use target lock on, you want to rebind these, but again, I don't recommend this. Now your main your 2 abilities you're going to have, the Q binding is not bad. You can activate one by tapping Q and the other one by holding down Q. That's okay. Activating your ultimate, R is not bad because you're going to kind of hold it down. It takes a second or so to activate. But team attack T is a huge pain in the butt. You're going to proc these at a decent rate. Different characters proc them differently, but you're going to have basically a prompt on your screen of a second or two to hit the button. And T is kind of far away for most people. I would so what I have it as normally when it doesn't reset this, I change this to F, and that's easy to press, and it's much more responsive. Special ability, same thing here. Reaching to G is a big pain. G is your special attack. Now for Driss, for example, I don't like my special move. It seems really underpowered. But if you like yours, you probably want something a little easier. So I recommend, for example, Z. Since you're moving with WSAD, so Z is my recommendation, easy to tap. Block and parry, again, they have tab here, I believe. I hate this. I don't block that often, but some characters do. You're going to want this for a button that you can press very easily. For me, I have it as X because that's, when you're in your block mode or you want to tap parry, that's easy enough to press. So that's how I rebind it. Toggle run is shift. That's perfectly fine. That makes sense. And again, evade makes no sense. So for me, because I evade so much, I change this to one of my mouse buttons. So my thumb mouse button, so I can tap this nice and easy. And obviously, space bar jump is fine. Interact is fine. For E and push talk is whatever you want to have it. Now, another pet peeve of mine is I communicate outside of the in-game chat, but it keeps, as of the current review, keeps enabling automatic voice commands with auto pickup of audio, and you have to constantly disable it. I don't know why. That needs to be fixed as soon as possible. It's really irritating when you're talking over Discord or something and then you're getting echo from also hearing it from in-game. So that's a minor pet peeve, but again, I recommend you change your binding to something like this, or at least something that you find much, much more appropriate for you, because the default settings are just absolutely poor. And I think they will ruin your experience of how the game plays. Now let's talk about the characters. Again, there are going to be 4 characters in this game, and they all have a unique way of playing, but the way that they're designed as you level up is going to be consistent, and I want to go over that because I have some major issues here. Now, there are currently 4 characters. This is Drist, this is the main character I played to max level, got a max gear for the most part. There's going to be a 5th. Now, this character is a ranger, but not a ranger in D&D like you think, like, oh, there's a hybrid of like bow and arrow and also swords. No, he has dual scimitars, there's a little bit of magic. Is more of like a rogue archetype, to be honest. A lot of backstab damage, etc. Now, here's the interface, and there's a lot of information here, but my biggest gripe is that there's a lot of information is poorly communicated. First of all, if you're used to D&D and you look at these stats, make sure you look at the descriptors, because what these stats do are not what they do in Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, this is very, very frustrating in some cases. So if you mouse over, for example, strength, this is going to increase physical damage, but also armor. And you're like, what? Strength does not increase armor in Dungeons & Dragons, but yes, it does in this game. Dexterity. This is going to, you would think dexterity would increase armor class innately. It doesn't. Now, Drist does get a special feat later on that you can turn dexterity into armor, but no, this doesn't make you faster. All it does is increases your crit chance and crit damage, which isn't bad, but again, it's not consistent with what Dungeons and Dragons has dexterity be. Constitution is a little bit better. It has stamina, increases stamina regen, as well as health boost. We'll talk about stamina in a second. It's for some characters, it's a bigger issue than others. For Drist, I never found it to be an issue. Never really paid attention to the stamina bar, but we'll talk about that in a second as well. Intelligence is a little confusing as well. It increases your elemental damage, your condition penetration. So conditions are like bleeding, more likely to bleed, or apply toxic effects, etc. And also reduces your cooldowns on your abilities, but not on your ultimate bar. Again, never seen intelligence impact cooldowns ever. So this is something you want to know about. Then there's wisdom. And wisdom, again, in D&D, it's like your perception, the ability for you to, find stuff in the world that are hidden, or in communication. Since none of that is a thing in this game, they've instead made it so it's going to boost your resistance to elemental and condition damage, so less likely to bleed, etc. My opinion is never put a point in here ever. You're going to maybe get some from gear like I do, but it's a bad stat to put points into. I don't even feel that big of a difference with having 15 into this. And finally, charisma. Nothing about being charismatic. All this does is increases 2 things. Your character's ultimate regeneration. And what this doesn't say is this isn't an automatic regeneration. The way you charge up your ultimate in this game is through either doing combos, and they're going to increase your regeneration bar by a certain amount. Certain abilities, when you read them or moves, it will say they also increase your regeneration extra amount. And then there's a specific potion. This impacts all of that, including the potion. So there's a potion that when you use it, it increases your full ultimate bar by 75% when you max it out. But when you get this to 25 plus, it's going to go to full. Nowhere in this tooltip does it state that. And again, it can be very confusing because you would think, oh, it's going to increase the regen. Does that mean that it increases my ultimate bar 24/7, kind of like a mana regeneration? No, it doesn't. It just modifies how much regeneration you get per every time you do an attack. And basically, it's kind of easy to calculate, as you'll see in the stat sheet in a second, but it's 1 point equals 1%. So I have 30 charisma, that's a 30% increase. So those are the stats. Now, here's where things get interesting. You have all these overall ratings, but when you mouse over them, you have no idea what they are. This is kind of your attack rating. Here's your defense rating. Here's your magic rating. And I don't even know what these 2 numbers are. I'm assuming something to do with resistances and conditions. And then I know this number is your ultimate, overall part, your power rating. But again, you wouldn't know it by just looking at this. If you hit F, you're going to see the details for all the stats. And it shows you all of these elements, but again, there's no tooltips for it. And it gives you a fancy breakdown where it shows you where it comes from. So here's your stamina, for example. Oh, you get a certain amount from your character. This just means from you being level, in my case, level 20. And then it shows you how much extra you get from equipment, feats, etc. That's nice and helpful, but again, you don't know from just experience and playing. If you're brand new to this kind of game, you may not know what some of these things mean. And then there's a second whole page that talks about the different types of damage. Nowhere does this game say, like, for example, your weapon needs to have a baseline certain type of damage before any of the modifiers for it help out. So if you get a bonus to cold damage, I know this may sound like common sense, but you have to have your weapon actually do some cold damage before that comes into play. Otherwise, any bonuses to cold damage is going to be useless. So again, there's a bunch of information. Unfortunately, again, there's no tooltip within the tooltips where you can find out what they mean. And that is a problem. Now, let's move on to the next part of the character, which is actually going to be equipment. Now, equipment. So there's 8 slots, and you're going to basically get gear comes from level 1 all the way to level 5. They're just different rarities, as you see here. It goes all the way from white to green to blue to epic is purple, and then legendary. And they all come part of a set. There's various sets, and you'll notice in the bottom right hand corner where my picture is, there's going to be 3-piece, 5-piece, and 8-piece bonuses for everything. There are also generic sets for resistances. You'll find something like this. This is the cold resistance set, and it's very easily, it has some stacking resistances. So I do want to point out your 3-piece bonus does stack with your 5-piece bonus. And then in this case, it has a really, really kind of underwhelming 8-piece bonus. That's a problem. So I mentioned in my overview that a lot of these sets are unbalanced. The 2% or 4% chance to proc something when you get hit is utterly useless. This game on higher difficulties is so brutal. It's more about either parrying or dodging all attacks. You're actually getting hit enough times to proc one of these, you're probably going to be dead. Unless you play like the dwarf and you go super, super defensive. So some of these have not really been thought out. Each piece of loot is going to have different stats. But again, you need to make sure you read up and know what they do because it doesn't tell you what it actually does. Also, you'll notice when you look at a piece of loot, there's little bars. So everything starts at level 1. You can upgrade it 2 more times. The problem is when you upgrade them at the vendor, it doesn't do very much of an increase. Like you need to upgrade them, but we're talking about, like in this case, here, you have 33 acid. You can upgrade it twice. Maybe it'll be like 36 or 38 acid. It's not going to be substantial upgrades. So there is some modifications as far as making each piece of loot a little bit better. But really, the main difference is your piece of loot level tier 1, and that's the number upper right hand corner, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The best and perfectly rolled tier 4 loot is not going to be able to have nearly the same levels of stats as a level 5. You'll see here's basically like probably the 2 best items I could possibly find for this character. They add a total of 40 stats, but this is a tier 5. And the legendaries are randomly rolled to a certain degree. So you'll notice here they have pure stats, and here you have like elemental penetration as a stat. So while there is a progression, there's very little ways to customize it. Whatever you get, you can up the stats by a couple percentage points. Maybe maxed out, maybe 5, 10%. Otherwise, you can't alter any of the stats. You are kind of stuck at the mercy of the loot, of what drops for you. And they're not exactly super imaginative. The bonuses also, there are some kind of cool ones, like here's a sword that gives me some lifesteal. But for example, like critical, the 8-piece bonus, critical hit chance of a 5% of inflicting bleed, that's horrible. It's just about useless. So again, there is a balance issue. And you're going to find this across the board. The biggest problem is, again, as I mentioned, the game is very stingy. I have a decent amount of legendaries here, but I've also played this game quite a bit. So, and I spent most of this in multiplayer on the highest difficulties. And if you are not playing on the highest difficulties, you're going to have a problem. The other issue with loot is in the actual gameplay loop, when you're in the levels, you're going to run into, when you kill sets of enemies, you're going to run into these campfires, and they give you an option to either rest and get your potions back, or continue and increase your loot chance. What we found to testing is the only way to get decent loot at the end of the game is by never resting and maximizing the amount of basically rest points that you skip. In fact, I have never once in this game actually rested. I've always skipped it, and by the time you beat a level, if you've skipped a lot of the content, because you can skip a lot of it, and you haven't quote unquote utilized and passed on these campfires to increase your loot chance, you're going to get horrible loot. This is a perfect example of the final boss in the game. I'm not going to spoil it, but you go straight to the boss. There are 0 camps, and when you beat the game on the highest difficulty, you beat that final boss, which is a pretty long fight. It can be between 5 and 10 minutes long. You get horrible loot, and what I find is the reason for this is because there are no camps that you can quote-unquote you activate and skip to increase your loot chance. So we found that the best way to get legendaries is actually beating some of the lower tier content, where we got to go through and kind of activate and skip at least 3 of the campfires. So again, huge complaint here. This legendary loot, the chance of you getting it, you have to play high difficulties, it seems like, for the most part, if you want, especially if you want tier 5 loots, which is the best in the game. And you need to make sure you're clearing levels where you're able to kind of activate and skip multiple campfires, as they call them. Otherwise, be prepared to look at your end loot and see a bunch of whites and greens and blues and be like, where are my legendaries? So this really needs to get buffed. Now, there are 2 other slots here when it comes to equipment. You're going to have your potions, and we're going to take a look at it. There are a total of 8 potions. I'll go over these in the vendor interface, but you can equip any 4, and they do a variety of things from healing, health, stamina, increased resistance, etc. Some are better than others. We'll go over that in a second. Also, you can select one of 4 abilities. It looks like there's 4 open slots here. I'm guessing this is planned for the future. Going to add more. Again, the problem here is I'm using, for example, Fairy Fire right now and Battle Trance. But here's the problem. It says grants Vampiric and Frenzy to Dritz. Nowhere in game does it say what Vampiric means. Now, you can probably guess you do some damage and you heal based on the damage. That's correct. It doesn't tell you how long it lasts. Now, it doesn't tell you that Vampiric does 2 things. It actually does increase your damage and also does a life tap. The only reason I found this out is we looked on some third-party website that data mined the information. Otherwise, you have no idea. And then Fairy Fire inflicts cursed and frightens monsters within range, causes goblins to flee. Nowhere does it say what the actual range is, and we have no idea what cursed is without looking it up. I believe cursed means that they do less damage, either that or they take more damage. Honestly, I don't even remember, because again, there's no tooltip in the game for it. And here's another, the blink ability. Become invisible. This was bugged as well, because when it first came out, you would deal damage and it would not immediately end, but it's supposed to. And then when exiting invisibility, you gain precision strikes. What in the world is precision strikes? Nowhere in game does it tell you. Again, I found out through an external source that supposedly this increases your crit chance by 8%, which is okay. Not bad, but my character as Driss has like over a 50% crit chance currently, I believe. So for a major effect, it's okay. And then some things are pretty simple. Like here, it says Driss is surrounded by a storm of flying daggers, cloud of daggers. They deal damage and inflict bleed. What does bleed mean? You don't know. Now you think it's damage, it is. But here's the other kicker. Dots, damage over times, are the most broken things in the game. To give an idea, when I proc bleed, and I really play with Driss to proc bleeds and toxins, I had a situation where I was fighting a boss, and my attacks were doing anywhere between 1,000 and 4,000 or 5,000 damage. I was able to double proc bleed, and I was doing 12,000 damage times 2 on this boss every second for like 8 to 10 seconds. Because again, nowhere does it tell you how long these bleeds work. But I did most of my damage through their bleed effects. You would never think that innately playing most of the games, because normally those damage effects are kind of minor. But here you go. In this case, it's a major part of your damage. And it is something that is something that's very important to note and keep track of, as it's going to have a major impact in your gameplay once you figure it out. Again, you're either going to watch this video and find out about it, or maybe stumble upon it. So again, you heard it here potentially first. Damage over time effects are super overpowered. Maybe it's nerfed by the time you're watching this, but that's where you do most of your damage. So those are your abilities. Again, you can set 2 of these in between missions, and there are various effects of different classes. Some have better ones than others, but in my case, these are the ones I were using. Sometimes I would use Cloud of Daggers. Try them out. They have cooldowns. Again, intelligence of all things impacts how quickly these refresh. There you go. Now you have moves. So you're going to unlock these as you level up. You're going to get special points to unlock these. And by the time you hit level 20, you will have all of these unlocked. Now, your quote-unquote combos, this dynamic combo system that they talked about, it's a combination of your light attacks, which like on a mouse is left click, fierce attack, right click. And then these special moves are a combination, almost like a Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, like one or two key entry combo. So for example, here, Health Punch, you tap forward and press the light attack, and it tells you what it does. Now, again, we have an issue of tooltips. They don't explain what these elements do. So here we go. Here's Near Conjuration. Tap forward and type hit light attack after most fierce attacks. What do you mean most fierce attacks? It's like, this is confusing. Sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. It summons your old pet tiger, and it has a 60% chance to inflict curse and heals you by 1% hit point. 1% hit point is a joke. And 60% chance, that's pretty good to curse. But again, if you don't know what curse means, this is useless. The other problem is, so here are your level 15 attacks. Dark Hand, horrible to target, does really bad damage. Now it says it has a high virulence factor and has a 60% chance to inflict curse when connecting. What in the world? Are we supposed to know what virulence means? I know, like, that means normally when it comes to like a disease or a virus, it can spread more easily. But why in the world does this make you think it's going to spread? Now, this does necrotic damage. And so again, the game doesn't explain it anywhere, but magic or necrotic damage, etc. is supposed to bypass all armor, and only if an enemy has elemental resistance is this supposed to get hampered. But unfortunately, most of your basic attacks will do way more damage, and they're not going to have as long of a wind-up time to do the ability. Here's another example, the Well of Darkness. This is the other max level ability. It looks really cool, but it's all melee range. It takes forever to cast, and you're probably going to get one shot while you're casting it. On top of it, it does horrible damage. It says it drains the enemy's stamina, 55% chance to frighten, and replenishes slow recoverable stamina. What? Again, Drist will never have normal stamina issues, so this doesn't do much. The only time you're going to have stamina issues if you use this special ability. Now check this out, Spear of Darkness. Look at the little video. It looks super cool. But every time you use it, it lowers your maximum stamina by like 5 or 10%. So if you spam this like 10 times during a level, you could be out of stamina. And if you have no stamina, you can't do anything. You go into this like staggered state and you can't use your abilities. It's horrible. What's worse is, even though this looks cool, it does almost no damage in reality. Like on a test dummy, it does like 600 or more damage. But in practicality, on most enemies I used this on, this did like 60 damage. I don't know if that's a bug in game, but I found this absolutely useless. And again, it's supposed to have a 25% chance to frighten and deal slight stamina destruction. Now you would think by definition, you're thinking it's doing stamina destruction for the enemy. No, this does stamina destruction for you. It harms you. Blew my mind. Why would you have a special ability that you unlock that harms you as a character? It's horrible to feel. I never use this. And you'll notice that a lot of these abilities, when you actually play with them, some of them you'll do them automatically, but other ones, they just don't feel good. Now, I mentioned earlier in the review that I found one ability that worked really well, and that's for me, Barrel Roll. This is kind of annoying to learn. Once you master it, Drist becomes the master DPS. But look at the complexity here. It says dash forward twice and press light attack. Then during the light attack, tap forward and right click, which is fierce. Now here's the problem. When you're dashing forward, you have to push a direction. And then you're supposed to let go of the direction, hit light tap. Then you're going to be basically have a moment where you need to tap forward and right click or fierce. And that's when he does the little spin. Mess up any of that, and it's it's a mess. It's going to take you time to learn it and to aim it, etc. Now, here's the good news. If you learn and master this, it looks awesome. Uh, as far as the damage number, you're going to be huge. And also, it has the secondary effect where it's going to also increase your ultimate gauge. So I spam this. I can use my ultimate all the time, it seems like. And it has a 40% chance to inflict bleed. If you saw my descriptor earlier when we talked about damage types, bleed is king. Like, damager times are king. So even though, again, I may do 4, 5, 6,000 damage, sometimes a little more of this attack, the real winner is when I proc my bleed on an enemy. And again, it doesn't seem to be at a 40% rate, what I see. I think this number is modified by your conditional chance. Again, it's not shown anywhere in the game or tooltip that it does this. But when this bleed goes off, the bosses melt. So, again, it goes from effective to super broken, but it's very frustrating because unlike every other combo, it's really easy. And this is, again, the experience for Drist. Most of the other abilities don't seem worthwhile doing other than spamming your light and heavy attacks. They really need to do a balanced pass on these abilities, explain what the conditions do. And again, I think just any of the special abilities need to do more damage overall. Otherwise, most people would just spam light and fierce attacks with this character. And I know other classes have their own issues. I don't have as much experience with those classes, but I have heard from the other people I play with that the results may vary. Everybody seems to have one or two moves that they do more often than not, and a lot of other moves are kind of disappointing. All right, next we have feats. And you're going to notice that each character has 3 different tabs of feats. So for Drist here, you got Expertise, the Hunter, and the Ranger. Again, as you level up to max 12 or max level 20 and also unlock extra nodes, there are basically puzzles within the game that aren't too difficult. They'll give you extra points to unlock these. You will eventually get all of these. Now, they have various, when you basically put points to this, they're going to have some effects that are game-changing, some aren't. So, for example, under Expertise here, here's a really basic one. If you're in multiplayer, it's like super huge. So, increases your hit points when you get raised to 100%. That is huge. Some of them you're not going to care as much about. Like 10% max stamina is nothing. But yet, since Drist does a ton of evading, 15% stamina cost reduction from evades and dodges is huge. Other things, for example, like Scavenger, increases usables drops by 1. What is this? Well, again, what you're going to learn is there are going to be chests in the world, and sometimes enemies that will drop potions. And so instead of getting like 1, you're going to get 2, for example. Now, different potions are going to have different caps, so sometimes this isn't as helpful as other times. But yet, another bonus like here at the bottom, Pack Rat is huge, increases usable capacity by 1. Now, with really powerful potions like the Ultimate Refresh, which has a maximum of 1, this is huge. This will double the effectiveness of that potion. Other areas like your health potion, not as big of a deal. And there are other areas that are useless, like 10% reduction in merchant prices in the Kelvin's Karn, which is basically the one merchant. This is so stupid. You're going to have so much money, you're not going to care about it after all. So again, some of these are good, some of them are just fillers. Then like the Hunt here, you're going to notice, again, 5% physical damage, big whoop, not a big deal. Some of them, this is like a bottom tier one, which is you have to work to get to. And decreases stamina costs on all actions by 5%. This is actually substantial, but it doesn't sound that very cool. 15% physical damage bonus for airborne attacks. So your ultimate kind of barrel combo is an airborne attack, so this helps out, but you may very well play in a way that you almost never use this. So they will vary again in its effectiveness. This is kind of nice, 30% crit damage, 8% crit chance, it's all right. Now, for example, there are some that are game-changing mechanically. Like here's this one. You don't care as much about 10% armor bonus, but here converts 100% of your dexterity into armor. And considering that the best gear in the game will give you anywhere between like 20 and 25 armor, the fact that you can get up to 30 dexterity max on your character, this means that you can get up to 30 extra armor. That's like 1 1/4 extra gear slots. So this is kind of a game changer for Drist once you get it. So again, we go from almost useless to game changing. And then 10% max hit points, again, this doesn't excite me. And then 15% armor bonus for 2 seconds after evade. I mean, this isn't bad because, again, it's 15% and you're always dodging, but 2 seconds isn't that long. It'd be nice if this lasted longer. So again, Some of them are important and game changing. Others are really, really boring. There's no real sense of choice because you're going to get it all. It'd be nice if they were more powerful and more, and you could only get certain ones because then there would be build variety. As is, this is just another thing to fill in. You're going to get all of them, and it's a missed opportunity. There's also a journal tab. I've never really looked at this. If you want to know about the game, this is where you read about it. These different bios, etc. Notice I haven't really looked at any of this that much. And this is where the story and lore is, because the game again has very sparse story and lore. I, for the most part, didn't even know what was really going on, sadly, when I was playing. So, but if you really want to know about the story, this is where you go. If you read the books, you're going to love this. I did want to point out the journal is there. All right, and now I wanted to show you guys the vendor. And the vendor it actually does a lot. People kind of mention in a lot of reviews how this is useless. It's not technically useless, but it's a little underwhelming. So first thing you can do is you can go manage your equipment. And what it doesn't explain to you is that you can upgrade the loot. So let's say I just go in here and I select one of these loots. If you mouse over it, notice it says to upgrade. So here's the problem. This piece of loot right now has 19 armor. It's level 1. You can up it 2 more times. But notice it says it has 6 to all stats. But if I upgrade it, which I'm going to do right now, I got 1 extra armor and it didn't increase my stats at all. And it gives you a meme preview. If I max it to max level, it's again just going to give me between 1 and 1 armor and nothing else. So basically, if I upgrade this to max, I get a total of 2 armor. That feels horrible. Other pieces, like here, for example, this bottom one, it starts with 4. And if I upgrade it, I'm guaranteed to get an extra 2 stats. That's pretty good. It'll go from 4 to 6. But then we're talking about, wait, this says 33 acid resistance. And if I upgrade it, I'm going to an extra 1 to 2 acid armor resistance. That's horrible. You're going to see this problem across the board. This epic piece, this was the most substantial upgrade. It started as a +8. When I maxed it out, it went to +10. That felt pretty good. That was an extra 8 stat points. For other cases, it's going to be really underwhelming. And again, initially, this is going to feel like it's going to cost a lot of resources. Like you'll notice, 9 legendary gems and 15,000 gold for an upgrade. Eventually, you're going to be swimming in these materials. You're not going to care. You're going to be able to upgrade whatever you want. Just a lot of times, items won't be worth upgrading. Again, take a look at this weapon. This is a tier 5 lightning resistance weapon. Horrible. You don't want a lightning DPS weapon, but beside the point. If you upgrade it, yeah, it increases your damage between 7 and 22, which compared to 247 base isn't that much. But look at the other stats. We're talking about my lightning resistance will go up either 1 or 2. My elemental penetration goes up 1. Condition penetration 1. It can't even roll higher. It just feels bad. The equipment upgradability needs to be completely overhauled. Otherwise, it really doesn't do much. You're talking about the percentage increases you're going to get on your power is too minute. There's skins. You can, certain pieces, not all of them. I found out most legendary pieces, you can change the look of them. Some you can't, like this epic piece you can't. But this legendary cloak you can. So I can make it look like a red dragon, like this greenish. I mean, some of these are not that big, like white and this really weird, I don't know, purple and gold. So you can change them. They don't cost too much to change. Again, it's only going to change the colors. It's not going to really change the look. Same with the masks. Okay, so this one you can't change. I don't know why. And what's weird is I could have sworn I could change in the past. Oh, it's probably because it's the cold resist. So certain sets you can. Dragon's Bane you can't. So my gloves, again. There's some customization. But again, the textures don't change really. It's just the colors. It's okay. Upgrade material. Most of the reviews don't tell you this, but you can upgrade any material up or down. So you'll notice if you're trying to upgrade the legendary pieces and you don't have enough legendary, you can basically upgrade epic gems at a 3-to-1 ratio and some money to get more legendary gems. Or let's say for whatever reason you're upgrading a blue item and you don't have enough of them, but you have epic crystals, you can break them down. So this, as long as you have gold, you can upgrade or downgrade any of these eventually into others. But I'll tell you, to upgrade any amount of common crystals into legendary, you just spend so much time clicking on it and waiting for it to happen because the upgrades take forever. look in the bottom right hand corner. When I hit enter to upgrade, it took that long just to upgrade this to get 1 green. And then you need 8 greens to do 1 blue, 6 blues to 1 epic, 3 purples to get 1 legendary. So that's a lot of clicking. You would be sitting here for hours, it feels like. So I've never actually used this, but it is there. More often than not, maybe if you need a couple legendary crystals and you're on epic, that might be useful. And now let's talk about usable upgrades. You're going to be able to unlock all these potions of gold. And some of them are way more useful than others, so I'm going to go over them and their usability. Health potions, critical. You want to get this because the dwarf and the archer have ways of self-healing with and group healing. Drist has only his ability that gives you vampiric healing. So if you're not in a group, you're going to be relying on these potions to heal you some. Stamina potions, like for Drist, I never used it because I never had stamina issues. But the archer class, for example, I've heard has a lot of stamina issues unless you get a set that helps with stamina or you pump your stamina statistic. So this could be useful for them. Potion of Heroism is godly. It is going to refresh your ultimate meter. You can use your ultimate meter to either do your ultimate attacks or you can empower abilities. And empowering is very simple. Basically, once you hit with any kind of attack, a basic attack or otherwise, you can hit the default button is E for PC, and it's mapped differently on Xbox. It'll like power the attack, do a bunch of damage. It takes a sum of the bar down, and you can like knock back the enemy. When you max this out, it's 75%. As I mentioned, if you have Charisma will modify this, and you can get it to fill up your full bar. Baseline, you can only get 1 of these every time you maximum. But as I showed in the feat section, there's a feat that lets you get +1 on this. So I always start with 2 of these. I proc the first one right when I start. So when I run into the first batch of enemies, I can ultimate right away. You're going to get these through chests randomly and off enemies. Sometimes they'll drop. So this is probably it is the most powerful potion in the game. Alchemic Fire. This is an AoE damage attack. It's a bit annoying to target sometimes. You may spam it and pay off. I don't personally use it. If you stack and you have a lot of physical damages, it can be useful. Again, a lot of people love this for an extra DPS, but considering you only have a certain amount of uses on it, I didn't utilize it as one of my slots, but you may like it. Elixir of Cleansing, it removes all your debuffs, which can be helpful. Like dots, just like against the enemy are really powerful against you. And it gives you Unstoppable. Now again, nowhere does it tell you what Unstoppable is. Basically, Unstoppable means you can get, normally when you get damaged, you can get like staggered or knocked back. This supposedly keeps you from getting staggered or knocked back, although this doesn't always work. Again, I think that's a bug. But it does last 50 seconds, so it's not bad. Elixir of Resistance, again, you have to plan in advance. It increases your physical resistance by 50%. Lasts 75 seconds when you max it out. Pretty good. I have found, though, that at higher tier difficulties, as Drist, no matter what I do, there's no way to survive one-shot mechanics. So even if you have this up, you still have to dodge most things or parry them. Otherwise, you're going to get one-shot. So this helps from like smaller hits, but more often than not, you can shrug off normal hits without too much issue. It's the one-shots that kill you, and this doesn't help out. So if you're in a boss fight that you know they're going to do certain type of attacks that are physical and consistent, but now one-shot hits, this may be useful. Same with Elixir of Elemental Resistances. If there's a boss that does frost damage or a certain type of damage, you can plan this in advance. 75 seconds is a long time. It can help out. This is one that I use because there are certain bosses that are known for certain elemental attacks, and it helps out. So for me, I use Health Potion. I use Elemental Resistance. I use Heroism. And there's one more here. Sorry, it's blocked by my, unfortunately, by my camera. But it's Elixir of Concentration. It grants a 50% ability cooldown reduction for 30 seconds. This does not refresh your ultimate. It's only for your 2 abilities. And so I find this useful as well. Depending on your class and what abilities you use, you may rely on those more often than not. You can have multiple of these, I believe 4 at max. So you can definitely use this and just keep that uptime, refresh rate on those abilities. So this is the 4th one that I like to use in a lot of scenarios. Again, they all start locked, but for a nominal amount of gold, you're going to be able to upgrade, and within no time, you'll have all these maxed out, and you can kind of pick and choose what you have. So that is the whole vendor interface and everything you can currently do. All right, now before I get to the final score, I did want to kind of do a little playthrough for you guys of a part of a level to kind of show you some of the mechanics and some of the issues live within this review, just how I like to do these things. I did want to emphasize one other thing about end game progression, is this issue that as the difficulty spikes, the biggest thing you're fighting is one-shot mechanics. So in multiplayer, I will state this, I'm showing this right now in single player. The game is much, much more frustrating in single player than in multiplayer. And in multiplayer, because you can have people in your party res you multiple times with no penalty, as long as everybody doesn't die, you can keep going. But in single player, you get knocked out and quote-unquote killed once, it's insta reset, and you go to your last campfire that you either activated, but again, that's a double-edged sword, because if you activate a campfire, you've lowered your chance of receiving good loot, which defeats the whole purpose. So what ends up happening is you probably shouldn't be using those campfires, which means it sends you all the way to the beginning and ruins the experience, because you got to re-clear everything in order to build up that kind of secret kind of counter in the background of the game that increases your chance of loot. So do keep that in mind. So I'm going to show you one of these levels really quick here. I'm going to kind of show you the level on level difficulty 4, which is like middle. Like I should be able to level 6, but I kind of want to show you because most people are not going to be playing level 6. And remember, my gear is for level 6, so it's going to give you perspective. When I take damage, you'll see like, wait a minute, shouldn't this be super easy? And in some cases it will be. Other cases you may be surprised that I actually take damage. So again, this is level 4 difficulty of this dungeon. I'm also going to enable some of the music, and I'm also going to let play the auto narration for the level, because this is the only time that you're going to actually hear some of the story. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'm going to comment as I do the run-through for part of it. It's not going to be a full run-through, but comment on some of the elements. So I hope you enjoy that. If you're not interested in that, you can skip over to my final verdict that you're going to see right after this piece of content. Alright, I've gone ahead and enabled the music in the game. And I'm also going to select the level here. Now this is when you select this, it's going to give you
Goblins had begun constructing a tower to secure their foothold in Bruner's home, and had spread out from that stronghold into the Dwarven Valley. The first step to clear out the goblins was breaking into the goblin fort guarding the entrance to Rugrib's quarter. We would have to recover explosives to blow our way through their fortifications, and then take out the foreman and his Verbeeg enforcer.
Alright, so that's the voiceover, and for better or for worse, the voiceover quality is quite good. The problem is, that's pretty much the gist of the story and voice you're going to have. If you're playing single player, this is great. The problem is, if you're in multiplayer, the other players will not hear this at all. So they're going to be waiting while you're listening to this and going, what's going on? So again, we're going to try this on difficulty level 4, which is, again, I'm way over leveled for this, but this is kind of a level that most people may end up playing on. You also hear the music. Again, I had it for most of the review muted, but the music is quite nice. Now let's go ahead and start the level, and you're going to see this little introduction. The introduction graphics and are really nice. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to let it play through so you get a feel of what the introduction is. It does a pretty nice job setting things up.
Hey! I need that! I'm on break! Cowboy! More planes! Right here! Where are you going with that? Put that over there! Kevlar! Move your sucker!
Move your own sucker, Bofa Shuck!
Hey! Get that!
Watch
out! I said there! Not here! There!
Come on, Tommy!
Gatan! Gatan! Not there! There!
Butternut!
Now, Boba!
All right! Out of the way, grub! Move, boy! This is heavy! You're in my way, Bofa Shuck!
Don't just stand there! Move it! Move it!
It's not my fault this They need that below gutter!
Meat's dropping from the sky, boys! Gob kebab. Still bloody. That's lunch!
Back to work, Advertised!
As you see, these little cutscenes, they kind of introduce you to each level. There's a bit of a comedy. They're all pretty good, actually. So they're enjoyable. Now, let's get into this level.
This Emperor Hamburg is indeed
So
bold
if you follow
if he
this little
believes he can
compass,
hold
it's
this
going to lead you
valley.
right where you need to go. But you'll notice right away, there's numerous areas where you can go off a beaten path. These little red things, this will tell you that you can climb on it. It gives you hints. But these are traps, and these traps are deadly, so you have to be very careful. They could very easily kill you. Up there's a chest, so let me kind of show you. Gonna go fast to avoid it. Now, you can break down these nodes, and notice they gave me 4 common crystals. This is totally random. Sometimes you'll get legendary, sometimes common, and everybody in your party will automatically get those. There's these chests that give you gold, and when there's gold drops, also automatically shares of everybody. You'll notice potions. Potions are also automatic. But some chests are larger, and they're going to give you epic loot, or different quality loot. And those you have to have everybody get individually. Now, the traps, be careful. The traps actually do a ton of damage to you in this game, but yet you can fall off a cliff and not take any damage. Well, some areas you can. But there's no falling to your death in this game, which is interesting.
How did the Emperor get the dwarves to abandon this valley? The shard before.
And if you listen, you can hear some story and banter amongst enemies as well. Now, the levels are pretty big, and again, each level has got a unique theme.
Themselves when they see our tower.
So I'm going to use my ultimate ability recharge. Now, on my upper left-hand corner, I want to point out, you're going to see my health bar and stamina bar. Unfortunately, my camera on the bottom left is covering my ultimate bar and like my hotkeys, but they're not as important right now. What I do want to point out is the stamina bar. Earlier in the recording, I mentioned how there are special abilities that take your max stamina down. So anytime you attack, your stamina goes down. Now you'll notice my character, most attacks, they don't use that much. And they regen when you stop attacking. It's not a big deal. But you saw one attack where my little bar went down, and that attack permanently lowered my stamina. Here's another one. Here's my really cool looking ability. Notice that did 65 damage, and look, it dropped my ultimate. That's horrible. Now look how much my just basic attacks do. Okay. And then look what my ultimate attack does. If I can get it off, right?
This one
So that crits for 6,000 damage. Okay, so again, as you notice, there's a huge imbalance. This guy's got armor, so like, for example, I have to break his armor down before he's effective. And a multiplayer, if you have a character that can bypass armor, it's much easier. If you can't, it's a little more difficult. So again, wild range and damage. That did 1,400 damage in one attack. My other attacks were doing like 50 damage. Again, now notice, I can go down this way, down the main path, but here's another example. I can go this way for a side path. I can go here for a side path. Now, perfect example. Remember I said the falling to your death? You're dead. No, I'm not dead. All they just reset. 0 consequence. That's kind of kills it. Again, here's the traps. You have to be careful because, again, if you... That explosion, I want to use an example, does a ton of damage. Well, on higher difficulties. Remember, I'm overpowered. That didn't do that much damage. And here's an example of a bigger chest. And this chest, for whatever reason, so you dropped a piece of loot, a green loot. You don't know what it is, you just know it's uncommon. Now what's annoying is every other piece of gear or chest, when you loot it, everybody gets it. But here you have to communicate your group, hey, by the way, I found this chest, come and get it, because it's going to be on the ground, and if you don't lose it, you lose it forever. And you can lose legendary loot like that. So, in a way, I wish this was more like Outriders, where it would auto-loot it if you forget to loot it. I got a little spoiled with that game. And so what you're seeing here is you're going from area to area.
I defend these lands.
and there are these little little settings. Now, some of these I could totally skip this, but here's the problem I have. The problem I have is that you don't know some of these, when you beat them, they're going to unlock a little camp, and that's what I'm going to do here, because I don't know if this unlocks or not, but I want to get you guys to a point where I unlock the little camp. So here's, notice this dropped one of those consumables for my ultimate. Oops, and it disappeared. I just burned one because I was trying to min-max it, but it disappeared, unfortunately. So that one didn't do it, but in just a second, let's take a quick look. I'm going to show you guys how this works. Now I'm going to use my ultimate, and it goes nuts. And I have this tiger, it just goes and destroys everything. So my build is all about getting this ultimate as much as, and it just wreaks havoc. So I want to refresh this and have it used as often as possible. And again, I have those potions that let me refresh this, and then all my abilities will recharge a certain percentage. Alright, so here's a perfect example. You have the camp, you have 27 seconds to decide, and now you can either make a new checkpoint, refill your resumables, and you lose your bonus or you gain your bonus. Again, in this game, I have never taken a short rest, because again, these loot bonuses are the only way you're going to get really good loots at the end of the game, of the mission. It's not even guaranteed, but if you skip them, you have no chance. Now, notice I mentioned you can skip content. So that was not a mandatory group of enemies. I could have run past that. The problem is if you run past it, you miss that fight and you miss that chance at a loot chance. So if you, there are certain areas where you'll be blocked and you gotta fight certain fights. But if you do that, chances are you're gonna beat the level, and then you're not gonna have anything to show for. You're gonna get a bunch of whites and greens. So it really kills the experience. Now, it is also true that the AI isn't great. If you play melee class, you're not gonna have as many of these issues because you're gonna force yourself into melee with enemies. But if you're playing a ranged class, you can very well kind of shoot things from range, and they may not even activate for you. So there's the AIs there. The AI will either be really stupid, or sometimes, again, on higher difficulties, you have to worry about getting one shot. And if you get one shot, you got to start all over. But if you're in multiplayer, people can res you. So huge imbalance. So again, without going any further into this, this is kind of the gameplay loop, for better or for worse. Now, if you end up finding some moves you like and in learning the game flow, it can be quite enjoyable. Again, the end game progression, the loot progression needs to be fixed. But that's the gist of the gameplay overall. The bosses, they are indeed a mixed bag. Some of them, the end bosses, I don't want to spoil them again. There's some challenge to them. Other ones you can easily exploit. You can kind of knock them down in a corner and spam kill them. And they'll either range from doing very little, or again, you're going to have telegraphed moves that if you don't move out of the way, they will probably one-shot you. Again, if you're solo, that could mean the end of your level. If you're multiplayer, more often than not, you're fine unless everybody just goes DTD and gets one shot, and then you got to start over. All right, now it's time for my final verdict. And again, I'm going to split this to single-player experience versus co-op experience. Now, if you are rating this basically around only playing by yourself and solo, on a rating of 1 to 10, I would have to give this game a 5.5, unfortunately. Now, by no means is it, in my opinion, the worst game of the year, but this game was clearly not balanced around single player, which I think is a big fault, because I know a lot of people like to play single player. It is extremely unbalanced and unfair, especially one of the one-shot mechanics that you sometimes can really struggle and almost be impossible to avoid in higher difficulties. There are clearly some mechanics and certain enemies that are way easier to kill with certain characters than others, for example, and this can be very frustrating. There's a lot of bugs. They have been improving a lot of these things. Unfortunately, a lot of these changes have been kind of like ninja patches. I wish they did better communication. The game is pretty, the sound is fine, the music can be gorgeous, the voiceover art is top-notch, so a lot of that elements is great. They could, in theory, add more content if they can balance out the abilities, if they can basically buff the loot drops. There are a lot of things that can make this game quite a bit better. The controls are what they are. You're either going to love them or you're going to hate them. If you are okay with them or you enjoy them, then you will get way more mileage out of this in single player. So again, 5.5 out of 10 has potential to maybe turn into a 7 depending on what they do. Now, multiplayer. I streamed this game for the first 3 days. I got all the way to level 20, beat the entire game, farmed some loots, and it was all 4-player co-op. And I actually had a blast in that mode. It helped bypass some of the frustrations, especially the one-shot kills. Even when we got one-shot killed and like 1, 2, or 3 players were down, more often than not, one of the other characters was able to res us and we kept going. So we bypassed a lot of that frustration. There is some fun about coordinating different abilities. It's fun. The whole element of playing with other players, especially your friends, does come through here. And it does help the game, but I can't help but say that it's more of a bandage. It helps cover up some of the inherent issues that the game has. Still has a ton of skill balancing issues. Needs way better tooltips so people actually know what in the world these abilities, these effects, these stats really truly do. That needs to be improved. And then the end game progression and loot system needs to be much, much more rewarding. It's really unfair that the only way that you can get really, really good gear is knowing which dungeons to run, because they have this magical combination of length, quickly and easily bypass a certain amount of campfires to maximize your loot chance, and then make sure the difficulty, is accessible for your group so that you can get multiple legendaries a run. It is possible to do, but without trial and error or looking it up on the internet, you're likely to do the things that you think should be the most rewarding, i.e. beating the highest levels on the highest difficulties and think you're going to get the best loot, and the reality is you're not. Farming the end game boss is not going to give you the best loot, but it should, in my opinion. So again, overall score, and this may surprise you guys, for multiplayer is quite a bit higher. I teeter between 7 and 7.5. There have been some changes as of this date of this review that have fixed a lot of the bugs and errors. So if I were to review this maybe a week ago, was a 7. For co-op, like 3 or 4 players, I've actually bumped it up to a 7.5, which may seem high for a lot of people. But again, I can't state enough. I had a lot of fun in co-op. It was really enjoyable, even with the frustrations. And again, I am a little bit more patient, and I do think they need to fix some of the shortcomings like the loot balance, etc. But I had fun. I think with time, if people give it a chance, and then I don't know if this game's going to have enough funding to fix itself, it could be as high as an 8, which again, I know is blasphemous compared to many mainstream media people. But I say it has that potential if they fix those issues, and if you're playing co-op. So this is a potential. If you like looter shooters / brawlers, and you have a PC Game Pass or Xbox Game Pass, get some friends together and give it a shot. Or if you don't have friends but you don't want to randomly queue people, which you can, come to our Discord. You can see the description to the Leeroy Gaming Discord below. We do have people that like this game, enjoy it. They can help you, teach you about the game. They can power level you or just play with you. And it can be a lot of fun. It's a decent community of really, really top-notch people. So make sure to check it out. Or stop by and watch a stream on twitch.tv/Leeroy Gaming stream. Even get a power level or a carry with us if you play on Xbox or PC Game Pass. So again, those are my reviews. Currently 5.5 for solo play, up to 7.5 or 7.5 for co-op if you're playing 3 or 4 players with friends. Alright guys, hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you do, drop a like, drop a comment, hit that notification bell. This is the first kind of big review I've done. I don't have a format that I've perfected or any means of that. So love your commentary of constructive criticism, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of, and hope overall though that you did enjoy this and find it helpful. Leeroy with Leeroy Gaming, and I'll see you guys in my next video.